This is Claude Williams doing a bit of a preview of what's going to happen with the CISSP domain enhancement. Just wanted to make sure that all of you that are preparing to take the exam don't panic just because there's been an announcement for domain realignment, as I call it. So again, my name is Claude Williams, former ISC² insider, worked there for about 5.5 years. Still very much one of my favorite certifications, certainly one of my favorite certification bodies. Just want to give you a little information as you prepare for your CISSP exam on the domain enhancement. So let's jump right into it. And if you have questions, feel free to email me. My email address will be at the end of the presentation. But just in case you want to write it down now, it's cwilliams@phoenixts.com. Again, that's cwilliams@phoenixts.com. And presentation won't be too long, about 20-30 minutes maximum. All right, so I work for Phoenix Technology Solutions, just a quick infomercial, if you will. Woman-owned small business headquartered in Columbia, Maryland, with offices local, as well as we do virtual training. To learn more about us, you can hit us on Facebook, and you can just go to the website and subscribe to our social media pages at www.phoenixts.com. All right, got that out of the way. Let's get to business. So we want to talk about CISSP domain enhancements and what that means for us that are preparing for the exam. We want to then talk about preparing for the new exam. And then if we have folks that are listening in that want to ask questions right away, we can do a live Q&A. Otherwise, again, you can reach me via my email address at cwilliams@phoenixts.com. Everything that I'm showing you is from ISC², okay? So I borrowed it. And if you want to go right to the source to get more information, feel free. The source information is right there on the screen. And I recommend that if you want to get deeper into some of the changes, this would be the place to go, okay? They did a presentation last week on what the changes actually meant. And they went into each of the newly aligned domains and talked about how they changed the alignment, how they changed concepts from one domain to another. So if you really want that level of detail, you can go for it at that address that's showing up on the screen now. Now, do I really need that level of knowledge to pass this exam or to prepare for this exam? No, you absolutely don't. I'm going to give you everything that I believe you'll need to know in order to continue your preparation and then to ultimately take and pass the CISSP. Why the changes? Well, they say realignment with new threats, new technologies, regulations, standards, and practices to maintain the relevancy and value of the credential for both existing members and for newcomers. What does Claude say? I say that it's an opportunity for them to enhance the concepts that are there, because if you've been studying for this exam, you know they've still been referring to things that go back to the late 1980s, early 1990s. I have taught this course probably well over 100, maybe approaching 150 times since working with ISC². And, you know, I have to teach, you know, antiquated concepts in some cases and technologies. Why? Because, you know, for the most part, it's a way of getting you to take that exam a second time. I mean, if you're new to technology, you may have not, you know, experienced modems. You know, you're like, what the heck is a modem, and why would we ever want to use it today? Yet there were questions, or at least concepts, that dealt with modems and dealt with, you know, SLIP, serial line internet protocol, dealt with PPP, point-to-point protocol. Some of these antiquated technologies that, you know, are not just mainstream today. And, you know, I think ISC² has finally realized that, you know, we can take some of that stuff out. I mean, it's great if I really wanted to get you to spend another, you know, $600 to take the exam, but really it doesn't do much for us as far as securing environments today. So we can take that stuff out now and really focus on technologies that are germane to true security in this current state of threats and vulnerabilities, and then ultimately risk. So they're saying that it's a realignment with new threats, technologies, regulations, standards, and practices. And I really want to believe that. Looking at their book, it looks like they've taken out a lot of that old stuff and they've introduced new concepts like cloud and virtualization, which is a great thing. Maintains relevancy and value for the credential. I truly believe in that. One of the things that I absolutely appreciate about ISC Squared is the fact that they do try to show value in the credential. I have maintained my CISSP for a number of years. I still find it to be the most valuable certification that I hold, and I hold a few. And I think the others have value, no doubt about it. But when it comes to recognition, the CISSP certainly holds, it's held in high esteem. So, it's the first one that I put on, my signature block. And I want, I want to have that pride for many years to come. And I think this realignment is going to help with that because it uses, current nomenclature. It also, again, if you look at the concepts that have been removed and the concepts that have been added, it really does reflect today's necessary security posture. Okay, so here's what ISC Squared presented about a week ago. Again, I'm borrowing this. This is not my information. This is their information. And when they went over it, they basically said, we're collapsing 10 domains down to 8 domains. And what we're doing is we're moving some of the concepts that were discussed in each domain around a bit. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Again, I've taught this course many, many times, and I personally juggled some things around. For example, there were some components of cryptography that I actually introduced as part of telecommunications and network security. And there were parts of telecommunications and network security that I introduced as part of, maybe software development or security architecture. Certainly, risk is germane throughout, right? So, there are pieces where I thought that, I could introduce a concept as part of the risk discussion or concepts of the risk as part of a different discussion. So I think they've done a good job and they've done their research. They've, talked to those that teach the course, instructors, trainers, and that, and the like, and kind of got a sense of, how they were delivering the concepts to maximize, impact in learning. Because the whole point is not just to get certified, right? The whole point is not just to have a credential. The whole point is to actually be able to secure your environment. I think ISC Squared holds true to that in trying to actually impact professionals and make them better at what they do, so that the awareness of security and the capabilities for security professionals grows. Now, as you can see, some of the domains look like they've gone away. Again, going from 10 to 8 sounds like you've lost 2 domains. And right off the bat, my favorite domain, cryptography, looks like it's eliminated. When actually, to the contrary, they've taken those cryptography-based concepts and now they've introduced them as part of communications and network security, identity and access management. And they've, put them in places where they make more sense, in my opinion, for learning. If the whole goal is to learn, then we want to organize the concepts in such a way that it can maximize the opportunity to learn. And I think they've done that with this realignment. The first thing I'm going to tell you is that everything that you've been studying of the 10 domains really pretty much exists. I would say, it's that 80-20 rule, but it's probably more than that. It's more 90-10. That everything that you've been studying actually still is represented in the 8 domains. So yeah, you lost a domain, you lost 2 domains, if you will, but they're really not lost. We've taken those concepts, we've moved them in to other domains now, so that we maximize learning. And everything that you've been studying still applies. It really does. Now, what about that 10% you're talking about, Claude? Well, that 10% has been removed, if you will, and 10% has been added. Now, does that mean I really need to go out and, find what that 10% is and study that hard in preparation for the exam? My feeling about that is no. Would it increase my chances? Obviously, yes. Now, if I don't know exactly what that 10% is, does that mean I'm absolutely going to fail? No, that's not true. 90%, like I said, of what's on the exam or what's changed in these domains, I apologize, 90% hasn't changed from the 10 domains to the 8 domains, okay? 10% is an introduction of new stuff and the, exploration of old stuff and really old stuff. But when you face the exam, remember, you're dealing with a scenario-based exam. You're dealing with an exam that really, for the most part, if you understand the thread of security, meaning understanding risk, understanding cost-benefit analysis, understanding basic concepts for dealing with vulnerabilities and dealing with threats. If you understand those basic concepts, that 10% is usually covered by, well, I mean, I don't want to say common sense, but that knowledge you've built from other stuff. I always tell folks, if you're trying to memorize a bunch of concepts to pass this exam, you're only doing half the work. The other half is really understanding how all these things connect and using that base knowledge, that foundational knowledge, to derive the right answer on the exam. There were many concepts that, to be honest with you, when I faced the exam, I wasn't 100%, about, but my instructor had done a good job at saying, okay, eliminate certain answers, get yourself down to 50-50. If you've got 4 possible answers, and that's what you'll have on the CISSP exam, A, B, C, or D, eliminate 2 of them that most likely, the way these psychometricians make this exam, have nothing to do with answering the question. Get down to those 2 and then use the base knowledge of risk management, risk assessments, cost-benefit analysis. Use the knowledge that you have about eliminating threats, dealing with vulnerabilities and that type of stuff to get down to the right answer or to give your best, guess, if you will. And that tremendously helped me because when I came across a concept that I really didn't feel comfortable with, I used that strategy, okay? Now, obviously, you need to know acronyms. Obviously, you need to know what the cloud is, right? But before you stepped up to take this particular exam, I hope you went through something like Security Plus, where you learned basic concepts. So here, where in Security Plus, it was mainly, based on terminology, based on, really understanding the foundational aspects of certain concepts. Here, you're taking those concepts and now applying them to real world scenarios. So we're assuming that before you sit for a CISSP, you've built up at least, a foundational knowledge of concepts. And here, what you're trying to do is figure out how now I can apply those to practical scenarios. So again, look at the domain realignment here, because that's really all it is. I mean, you say, well, where did physical security go? That's been sprinkled into like security operations and so on and so forth, right? So it's in there. It's just now been commingled into 8 domains that really use terminology that is part of the security workforce today. Now, you want more information of, okay, where exactly did crypto go or where did environmental security go? Take a look at that source I gave you from ISC Squared. You can click that link, download their slides. It goes deeply into that. Again, do I need to know where legal regulations and investigations and compliance now is in order to pass this exam? No. Do I need to know the concepts and how they might be applied given a scenario? Yes, I still need to know that because legal regulations, investigations, and compliance are still part of the exam experience. So just quickly, the 8 domains and what's a little bit of in each of these. Again, I just want to give all the credit to what's in this slide to ISC Squared and that source. Again, if you want more information, check it out. Security and risk management is really about general 10,000-foot overview of what security is. Okay, so why do we do it? What's a threat? What's a vulnerability? Ultimately, how threats, vulnerabilities equal at some point risk. So what's the difference? A lot of people, you'll say a threat, they think you're talking about risk. You'll say vulnerability, they think you're talking about risk. So really what the definition of risk is, you get a 10,000-foot overview of what risk is. There are whole courses and exams on risk. So this is, again, kind of just enough so that a security professional understands how risk plays a role in what they do. Compliance is discussed here, again, taken out of that, that legal section and now placed where it should be under Domain 1, Security and Risk Management. Law, regulations are there, and business continuity. I like the fact that they now introduce business continuity as part of that Domain 1 that deals with risk management, because business continuity is an answer to, or is a control for, dealing with and managing risk. So it makes sense that you would align it in the same domain. I'm a huge business continuity fan, so I like to see that up there, and I like the fact that it's in the first domain and not one of the last things we talk about. Asset security being the second domain. Again, these domains are in no specific order. ISC squared would even tell you that. It's not that Domain 1 is more important than Domain 2. It's just an order that of presentation. That's it. But they're all important. Asset security, protecting security assets. Here you might get into some of the physical security aspects of it, because assets don't only have to be protected from a technological perspective, but they also need to be protected from a physical perspective. Security engineering, engineering and management of security. Here you might get that discussion of all the models that you are have been accustomed to dealing with in the security architecture section. You're talking about models like Bell-LaPadula. You're talking about approaches for architecture like SAPSA, those types of things. In Domain 4, communications and network security, this is where you're going to start getting into some of that crypto and how that cryptography can be applied in actual protocols, right? You're going to go over the OSI reference model, which I would say is foundational knowledge you should have even before you get into this study for your exam. But all the networking stuff, all the cryptography stuff that you would expect, that you have been studying, kind of lumped into that section. Big section right there. Identity and access management, that's where your discussion about DACL, SACL, your MAC, your Radius, TACAX Plus, those types of things. What you've been studying, you know, in regards to really access controls before, are now in identity and access management. Security assessment and testing, Domain 6, security assessment and testing. I like this domain. I like the fact that they've kind of, you know, taken the taken some of the discussion about penetration testing and things like that out of really security operations and focused on it as its own domain. So important. How do I know whether my security strategy is making it down to the operational level? How do I know whether the controls in place are actually mitigating risk to an acceptable level? How does management have any confidence in my solutions? It's all about what? Testing. That drives assurance. That drives confidence. So focus should be on, how do I assess and test? At the end of the day, I don't know whether I'm being successful in my solutions until I test. There is no way to see whether I'm making progress in my security implementation until I test. So I like the fact that they kind of target this as a separate domain, and then you know, now your study can be really focused on that testing aspect and that assessment aspect. But yes, if you've been studying the operations, you know, section domain from the previous domain layout, you're going to be fine here. Although this is now called out of it as its own domain, don't panic. You've already gotten the foundational knowledge if you've been studying the old security operations. You already have that foundational knowledge. You may glance at how some of the exam new components have been added. But again, it's that foundational knowledge and knowing how to apply those in given scenarios that counts. If you were trying to pass this exam by memorizing terms and expecting them to ask you, but what is DES? What is black box testing? You're studying for the wrong exam. That's Security Plus. If you're expecting questions that will ask you how black box testing could be applied in the real world, how DES is used in certain technologies, and for what purpose, Now you're studying for the CISSP. See, that's the more difficult part, right? It's really understanding all these concepts and then how to apply them. So when it comes to testing, looking at NIST documents about, how NIST recommends or provides guidelines for testing can be helpful, but just memorizing that's not going to do it. Now, how can I apply the NIST guidelines and what they recommend for testing to actual scenarios? Security operations now, domain 7, foundational concepts, investigations. So notice how they separated now law and regulations and compliance, and they put investigations, in a different domain. So it's just a realignment there. But getting into investigations, you know what that means. That means, and it makes sense in operations. It basically means that I have to have built an infrastructure to deal with investigations. Anything that happens as an incident could lead to some level of legal action, some form of litigation. So I need to treat every incident like it could be a crime. I need to build an infrastructure for that. I need to understand what forensics is and how you go about doing that. So security operations makes sense to have investigations there along with incident management. They go hand in hand. I love that. And of course, incidents can lead to some form of disaster. If that's the case, then it makes sense to have disaster recovery here. Now, you might be asking, what's the difference in business continuity and disaster recovery? Because when I studied this in the old domain alignment, they kind of put them together and I thought they were the same. No, they're not the same. Business continuity is the ability to continue business irrespective of technology. For example, if I walk across the street of our facilities here to Columbia Mall and I go into a store and their power's out, they should still be able to sell me something even though their computers don't work. They might get out a hand ticket and write up what I'm buying, write up the sale. They may then call in my credit card information and get an authorization number. They're able to continue business and generate revenue irrespective of technology. Well, that's business continuity. Most business continuity professionals, honestly, aren't necessarily technologists. They may not understand the underlying technology, but they do understand business, and they do understand how to build in redundancy or how to plan for redundancy and how to utilize that to keep business going. Where disaster recovery tends to focus specifically on technology. All the exchange servers are down. How are we going to recover from that? Okay. Where business continuity to say, all the exchange servers are down. Let's go to the phones. Let's do that old thing we used to do and call people instead of email them. Okay. So business continuity may look at it from a different perspective, where disaster recovery looks at, an incident was, the fact that the email service went down. And this can be a disaster to an organization, obviously, because a lot of business is done via email. And then I have to have a plan, a disaster recovery plan for recovering any emails that might have been lost and getting the services up and running within a timely fashion. So that's where that comes in. And that's all part of that domain security operations. Finally, domain 8, which the name has changed over time. It was application security, then it was application development, and then it was software development. This domain has been around for a while, and it really gets into the part where most CISSP candidates are uncomfortable. They're most uncomfortable here. Why? Well, because it deals with software. Think about it. Software developers, no offense to anyone that might be a software developer, they tend to be a bit introverted. They're not very social people, and they tend to be, the folks that don't think that anyone else can speak their language. Now, technologists and if you will, security people, they tend to be somewhat social because they got to talk to different folks and try to get to the bottom of understanding risk and all that good stuff. But they don't speak software development language. They don't understand polymorphism, polyinstantiation. They don't necessarily understand all that stuff, what a class is and things like that. So there's a bit of a disconnect sometimes between security professionals and software development folks and coders. So what ISC Squared has done is created a domain so that security people can start to understand the language and start to speak the language of software development, because let's be honest, most of the vulnerabilities we deal with are because of some type of issue within the software itself. So this is a very important domain. Hasn't really changed much, right? If you look at this domain versus, the alignment of the original, it is really software development security and all the things you expected there. The SDLCs discussed the different approaches like clean room, rapid prototyping, that type of thing. Okay, so let's get to the exam details here. As of today, tax day, that's right, you get a double whammy. The exam changed and you had to make sure your taxes are in. So as of today, the exam now reflects the new domain structure. Oh my God, Claude, I've been studying for 6 months and now you're telling me they changed the exam? No, I'm not saying that. I am not saying that. I said the exam will reflect the new domain structure. It's changed only in that fashion. The content of the exam, the majority of what you're going to face on the exam is all that stuff you've been studying for 6 months. So it's not wasted. If you went out and bought a book last week and you're like, crap, I bought an old book, I bought the Sean Harris all-in-one guide to the CISSP, and it has 10 domains, not these 8. Should I throw it away? Should I sell it on eBay? What should I do? Keep it, because the content of the concepts that are dealt with in that book are still germane to the exam. All that's changed is the domains as they are listed and how they organized the questions are based on the new domain structure. Well, does that mean there are not new questions, Claude? No, I can never say that. I cannot say that. Does that mean that some of the new concepts won't be included? Can't say that either, to be honest with you. But I can tell you the majority of what you're going to face is what you've already studied. I would say the vast majority. I would say, oh yeah, that 90%. I'm very confident in that. Okay. Now, if you have been studying 10 domains, again, feel confident you can still go forward with the exam. Right now, the only book that I would rely on that has the 8 domains reflected is the official ISC² guide to the CISSP CBK. Now, in the past, you may have known I didn't kind of recommend that book. Why? Because ISC² can't really write a book that reflects their exam directly because of a little ISO standard 17024, which says that a certification body cannot produce material that is prep material for their exam. Okay, so the past CISSP CBK guides that they put out were very generic when it came to what's on the exam. It just covered the CBK. Now, I can say that their current book is much thicker, much more comprehensive, and right now, really, the only and the primary guide to the layout or to the approach of study that would be more on the layout of the current domain structure. Okay. So with that said, I've reviewed the book and I do not see, as a trainer, as someone who has to prepare folks, next week for the new exam, I'm nowhere near in a panic of thinking that I have to, learn some new concepts myself and new ways to teach or whatever. Because, again, 90%, if not more, is what I've been teaching for years, okay? So if you've been studying, I want you to feel very confident that you could face this exam and pass it based on the 10 domain structure. Okay, now, we here at Phoenix TS have realigned our delivery to match the new 8 domain structure. So the things that we used to deliver in crypto are now realigned with the new domain, that type of thing. But again, did we change a lot of content? No, not necessary. And we, of course, use the CBK, the CISSP CBK book for our delivery at this point. Now, Claude, you didn't instill a lot of confidence in me. I'm still worried that 10%. Here's what I recommend you do. Go to the ISC² website www.isc2.org/exam outline and download the new objectives. And I believe you'll see, and you should do this anyway. If you have not downloaded these objectives, you should. This is going to tell you what you're going to face on the exam. And you should go through and you should highlight or red line or circle, whatever you got to do, all of the things that you know and you feel comfortable with. Or you take the inverse approach, highlight and circle those things that you don't have very much confidence in your knowledge of. Okay. Nevertheless, that needs to be your study guide. Once you get that exam outline, you go through and say, okay, I've been studying for 3 months. I've been studying for 6 months. I just took a class, whatever. You go through and say, okay, what don't I feel comfortable with? And that's where you're going to spend your independent study and your additional time as you approach the exam. And that will show you where that 10%, if there is any, that you may need to know that you may not have covered in the 10 domains book that you may have. Okay. And there are plenty of resources to capture that missing piece. I mean, I don't necessarily have to go out and invest in a new book, right? The internet is available to me, and if it's cloud stuff that wasn't covered before, there's plenty of cloud resources out there, that type of thing. Or get involved in a LinkedIn community and ask questions, that type of thing. You still register online for the exam at www.pearsonview.com/ISC2. The thing about this is that you should recognize that there's not a great availability of exam seats. It is a 6-hour exam. You're sitting in front of a computer for 6 hours. Not many facilities have the ability to allow you to occupy a seat for 6 hours. So it's given at Pearson VUE owned locations. For example, here in Columbia, we are a Pearson VUE authorized center, but we are not a Pearson VUE owned facility. So ISC Squared has elected to only make these exams, CISSP, SSCP, and there are others, available at Pearson VUE owned facilities. And there aren't that many, across the U.S. So make sure you're planning ahead of time, well ahead of time, to get yourself a seat at one of those locations. Okay. So think about registration being, anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks out, and check Pearson VUE's website for availability. The exam format has not changed. It is a 6-hour exam, 250 questions. Only 225 of them are actually graded. 25 questions are throwaway. As I tell my students, 25 questions are there to scare the bejeebas out of you, right? The whole point is to make you feel like you're not ready for the exam. Don't panic. When you get to one of those questions that says, well, what is the circumference of the earth? And you think to yourself, crap, my instructor didn't go over that. I don't remember that. That was something I learned in, middle school or high school. You get to a question like that, don't panic. Do the best you can. Realize it could be one of those 25 throwaways. Don't let that, throw you off your concentration and your focus. Okay. It is a multiple choice exam, A, B, C, or D, not all of the, click all of the above. It's not, choose 2 out of 3. It's not fill in the blank, none of that stuff. You have a 25% chance of being right every time you face a question. But you want to choose the best answer, because remember, there could be 4 bad answers. Which one's the best out of the lot? That's really what it boils down to. Or there could be 4 good answers. They all could address the scenario. But which one is the best? And when I say the best, you base that on the CBK, the common body of knowledge, right? So how ISC Squared would see it, not how you would see it, not how the government would see it, not how the DOD would see it, and certainly not how your manager would see it. You have to base your answers and what the best answer is on how ISC Squared sees it, okay? It's just the way it goes. When you take a seminar, which I highly recommend for preparing for this exam, that's one of the things your instructor is going to do. Your instructor is going to point out, you got this big, thick book. What are the concepts that you really need to know to face the exam? And how do you derive the CBK best answer? Okay. And I think that's where a lot of folks who really know this stuff still end up failing. It's because they're not trying to give ISC Squared the answer that they want. All right. So I think I've dealt with how do you study for this exam. You can self-study. It takes a very, very, very dedicated, committed person to self-study. No doubt about it. And it can take a while. It can take months. You know, I know a guy who's been studying currently for about 6 months, self-studying. It's kind of difficult. Now, again, I'm an instructor. I work at a training company, so take it for what it's worth. But I will tell you that, seminars can be helpful. These prep courses can be helpful. Why? The book is thick. Do you need to know everything in that book to pass the exam, to attack the exam? No. So what your instructor should do, the material used in one of these classes should do, is really minimize what's in that book to what you need to know to pass the exam. What are the concepts? What are the approaches that you're going to need to master in order to tackle the exam? That's the whole idea, right, of taking a class, because there's no way anyone can teach you, out of that book, the whole book, every concept that's in that book. That's impossible. That's impossible. But giving you, kind of an insider's knowledge, if you will, for the most part, based on intelligence of people who have, experienced the exam and kind of know what the concepts are that you're going to be tested on, is what you're kind of paying for, right? And that instructor's ability to make sure those concepts are clear in your mind and how they relate to other concepts. I always tell my students that if you're learning just a bunch of concepts, again, that's about 50% of passing the exam. But if you're understanding how all the concepts work together, how, we bring the concepts together and how they pivot off one another to build a secure environment from the top down, that's when it really becomes an easy exam. That's when the CBK opens up to you. And no matter what the question is, no matter what the concept, the technology, I should say, that they're trying to test you on, that's when it becomes easier to address those questions, because you understand the overall, approach to security. You understand how these different technologies will come and go, but security is still security, right? I mean, you understand that a pin is weak, just like a combination of a lock can be weak, right? It doesn't matter whether that's physical and one's electronic or technological. The concept is the same. There's not enough combinations, if you will, on a pin pad or on some type of combination physical lock. Just not enough combinations, that type of thing. So when you take one of these classes to prepare, the idea is to narrow, to really focus you in on that. If you're self-studying right now, again, if you have that 10 domains book, I wouldn't throw it away. I wouldn't make it firewood kindling. I would go ahead and use that. And then I would use the exam outline to try to figure out if that book you're studying from covers everything that you need to know. And then you're going to need to get your hands on some good practice questions and make sure you're involved in some type of online community to get support with, concepts that may still seem hazy. All right. So with all that being said, if you have additional questions, I am happy and willing to address those questions. You can reach me at cwilliams@phoenixts.com. If you want to reach me on LinkedIn, connect with me. That's fine. I'd love that. My LinkedIn identity is Claude LW, and that's the same as my Google Plus. So if you're a Google Plus person, and I need more connections on Google Plus, I'm suffering there. Then again, my identity is Claude LW there as well. I really do hope this has been helpful for you. As you face that exam, again, one of the most important things to remember as you sit down for 6 hours and 250 questions is not to try to bite this off in one, and not to try to eat all of this in one bite. It is really to take your time, pace yourself. 6 hours is plenty of time. Don't get frustrated. Don't get flustered. If you truly prepared well, the questions are going to hit you hard. And I think the first 10 questions are probably the most difficult. And that is to throw you off your game. Psychological game here. But if you really prepared for it, then approach it with patience. And I think that's probably the biggest advice I can give you for any test that you take. Realize that they have done their analysis and they know you have enough time to complete all the questions. for anyone who actually knows the concepts. So you've got plenty of time. All right. So I look forward to those questions. I do hope this has been helpful, and good luck on your exam.